In this video, we just want to look at writing your questions. What are the types of questions that you can ask, and what are the options that you have for those questions? So we are looking at our first untitled question, and before I can title the question or ask the question, I really need to kind of know what kind of question this is going to be. And in my pop-up menu, I have all of my options. So short answer would be the first one, and that's the perfect time to ask for someone to give us their name. And it automatically defaults to short answer because it believes that's what you want, and it is. And then you have options of, do you want to require people to give you that answer? And in most cases you do, or you wouldn't be asking for it. It's kind of not an optional question in many forms. So if you realize you've made a mistake, you can change all of those responses, or you can just delete it and start over. If your next question is also going to be a required short answer question, you can just duplicate that question and move on. Or we can click here and say, let's add our second question now. And maybe our second question is going to ask, what is the date that we are filling out this form? Today's date is, and because I use the word date, it automatically defaults to that particular option on the list, the date. And people would put in the month, day, and year. And again, we'll require it. Now, I told you the little eyeball would let you see how these look to the user. And this is a good time to go over and check so you can see that when they fill out the date, they can type it in, but it also gives them a calendar. And they can just pop up and choose the date that they are entering. So they have that option as well. We're in the middle of a class about Google skills, so let's make a question about that. Let's say, how do you feel about your skills with Google? And this is a good time for me to look at other question choices. I could come down and say, let's have a linear scale. And 1 is going to be not so good. And 5 is going to be pretty darn excellent. And again, we can see what that's going to look like. They would be selecting where do they fall on that spectrum. And they could clear that selection if they wanted to start over with their answers. So you can give them a linear scale. But there are other options. We could go to multiple choice. And option 1 would be, feel very confident about my skills. Mostly good, not so good, or need a lot more training. And now you have a multiple choice option. You can see what that's going to look like to your user. They would choose one item from that multiple choice list. How do they feel about their Google skills? What are our other choices when it comes to writing questions? People often confuse multiple choice with checkboxes. A checkbox, unlike a multiple choice, lets you choose more than one option. So more than one option would not work here. Someone can't feel both very confident and not so good. So I would have to rewrite my question. Which Google tools do you feel comfortable using? And now we're going to change them to Docs, Sheets, Slides, or Forms. And now you can see the user would be able to choose all the things that they feel good about using. Not Sheets yet, because we haven't learned anything about Sheets. So that's the one they're going to leave blank. So that gives you your checkbox option. Now, to make it a little more confusing, along with multiple choice and checkboxes, we have multiple choice grids and checkbox grids. So what does that mean? Let's go to a multiple choice grid, and I'm going to get rid of all the information that's in there so we can start fresh. A multiple choice grid is going to give the same options in the columns to a number of questions. So, how do you feel about the following Google tools? And then we would list them: Docs, Sheets, Forms, Slides. And the choices are going to be: feel really good about it, not so good about it. How does that look to the user? These are their 4 choices, and they can choose. Feel really good about this one, not so good here, not so good here, really good here. So you can see this is the grid. Again, the multiple choice grid only allows you to make one choice for each category. So one choice for docs, you can't select both of them. All right, we can leave that fake one and come back to here. How is that different from the checkbox grid? The checkbox grid, remember, checkboxes let you make more than one choice. So how do we write that question? Let's delete all the things that we have in there. And which do you feel good about? Totally good. Not so good. Docs, Sheets, Forms, Slides. And now, because it's checkbox and not a multiple choice, you can choose the ones you feel totally good about and the one you feel not so good about. So those are the different types of questions that you have over here. File upload, we're not going to look at that now. That's a little bit more of an advanced option. So the only 2 we haven't looked at are paragraph and Dropdown. So let's take a look at those. The paragraph really needs no explanation. That is just a question where you would be asking for a longer response. So, explain 2 things you learned in this course. And that's paragraph, because people may write a couple of questions, a couple of sentences, 3 sentences, whatever. It's going to give them a longer blank to write in. And the last option is a drop-down. A drop-down is where you want to have a long list for people to choose from, but you don't want them to have to do lots of scrolling to get through that list. So let's say, along with name and today's date, I ask for the room number where you worked. And I'm going to make that drop down. So the options would be: in C wing, we've got 150, 1502, 153. Over in B wing, I've got 173, 175, on and on and on. There's going to be a long list. To the user, that's going to look like this. What's your room number? It'll pop up and you would just choose the one that you wanted. Otherwise, this question becomes really a long multiple choice question where they're really just going to click one box, but they're going to be looking at a lot of numbers. Easier to just have a quick pop-up list. So those are the types of questions you can have. Any question can be a required question. The other thing I can do here, let's say I ask a question about this particular course. How many hours did you spend working on the optional activities? And that's going to be a short answer question. It's going to be a required question, but I want a response validation. And that means I'm going to control your answer. So in my question, I'm going to say, number of hours. And for response validation, the answer has to be a number. And then I can choose, is it greater than something? Is it less than something? Is it just a number? For me, I just want it to be a number. And if they don't put in a number, if they write the word to, TWO, I can give them a prompt. Please provide a number for your answer. And now it's going to be a response validation. So when I come over and see this answer and I put in 2, it will pop up, please provide a number for your answer. If I put in 2, that prompt goes away. So it is prompting me to respond in the way that I want as the questioner, so that I can more easily look at the response data later and know how long people spent on activities. That helps me sorting my data. So that's the last item there. So those are your basic types of questions. Next, we're going to look at how we can take those questions, spread them out a little more into sections, and then you'll be all done setting up your Google form.